Alrighty, well, we might as well get started. I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. It is a minute after the hour. I'd like to thank everyone for joining today. My name is Ryan. I lead the commercial partnerships on the offshore wind team here at Esgian. I do want to remind everyone that the third Thursday of every month, we will host a brief presentation covering current and relevant offshore wind topics. So be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and sign up for our monthly newsletter for all future events. Now, these monthly discussions, they're short, sweet, and to the point, and they're purposefully kept to 19 minutes as we want you to get the most value without a huge time commitment here. And if you have questions throughout the presentation, type them into the Q&A section at the top, and we'll be sure to get them answered, and we will handle all questions at the end. But for those of you that do not know who Esgian is, we are a market intelligence and data analysis company for the offshore industries, covering three primary segments. That's offshore rigs, shipping, and offshore wind. And within our global offshore wind platform, we help the industry from investors and developers to suppliers and everyone in between make sense of what is going on in the offshore wind market. And as many of you know, there's been tremendous growth and activity, and the offshore wind industry is facing many challenges, and it's quite chaotic. But as we all know, challenges do create opportunities, and every decision is a trade-off between risk and reward. And our goal as a company is to simplify and bring transparency and clarity to the industry. Within our wind analytics platform, you can see who's bidding, who's partnering together, who's winning in the past, what's happening in the future, where is it happening, when is it happening, what equipment's being used, what vessels are being used, amongst many other features. And if you'd like more information on this platform, I do encourage you to reach out directly to myself. But one of the interesting features here, or interesting things I would like to bring up, is that everything you hear in today's discussion has been derived from our wind analytics platform. And with that being said, I'd like to hand it over to Suzanne, who is one of our senior offshore wind analysts, and she'll dive a little bit deeper into the Q1 update from Esgian. Take it away, Suzanne.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so the first quarter of the year really exemplified that old maxim that slow and steady wins the race. We were really scratching our heads at the slowdown in activity in the first few months of the year. And by that, what we mean is a lack of contracts and relatively little in terms of auction activity or real policy action on the national and regional level. But I think something to keep in mind here is timescale. So short-term market movements versus longer-term trends. And based on what we've seen over the entire quarter, the longer-term trend has not really faltered. So the global pipeline additions have slowed down a little bit, but that's to be expected after the huge boom that we saw in announcements at the end of 2022. And the projects are seeing some shuffle, but so far we're talking the scale of a few months, not years. And at the end of the day, the global pipeline still rose in the first quarter just a bit. Now it's just over 455 gigawatts. So altogether, we're seeing a positive picture long-term and some interesting dynamics in the short term. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. So as we mentioned, not too much happened in terms of contract awards in any sector in the first 2 months of the year. We are largely attributing this to two things. So that's fears over inflation and ongoing geopolitical uncertainty. So these two factors, understandably, made investors a bit gun shy. And so we didn't see many final investment decisions in those 2 months. But the investment bottleneck started to unlock in March, which really had a catalytic effect. So that's when we started seeing those contracts begin to flow. In our full report, we go into a little bit more detail about those contracts, but I'll cover a few of the most significant kind of contract movements that we saw. One of the most was contracts for HVDC substations, so high voltage DC substations. In March, there was suddenly a flood of 13 new contracts for this type of substation. And those contracts came from the TSO Amprion, which awarded 2 contracts to Dragados for Bawin 1 and 2 in Germany, and also contracts from the TSO Tenant, which awarded 11 contracts in the Netherlands and Germany. 6 of these went to Hitachi Energy Petrofac, 3 went to Semcorp Marine, and 2 went to McDermott. So this is a huge uptick in contract activity for those high voltage systems. And we feel it's really a meaningful shift in the market that may be an indicator of what's to come for OSS in general. On the foundation side, which is what you see here on the chart, our lead times chart from our wind analytics tool, we saw that the 2 main European monopile suppliers each really solidified their position with a major award each. So that's EEW, who won a contract for 100 monopiles for the Sophia Wind project, and SIF, who won a contract for 40 monopiles for the Hollandse Kust West 6 project. Notable mention, Hyzea Wind also signed on for 50 of the monopiles for East Anglia 3 from its new Bilbao facility. And so the 2 main monopile suppliers in Europe are really cementing their position as frontrunners. And finally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the vessels market. I know a lot of you are interested in vessels. And we saw some exciting action in terms of new builds. So Jan de Noel's new build vessels, Le Alizé and Voltaire, were both delivered. Both vessels are expected to begin installation this summer. Le Alizé will begin at Gowind 3 and Borken Rifken 3 and Voltaire at Dogger Bank. But despite these exciting new build deliveries, the vessel market really remains uncomfortably tight. So Ørsted noted that prices for installation vessels at Sunrise Wind on the US East Coast contributed to its lower earning guidance that we saw released in the quarter. And similarly, we saw that installation vessel availability was cited as a contributing factor when Calvados, the wind farm in France, pushed back its COD to mid-2027. So in response, we know that the vessel market is aware of the tightness. We know that there's a huge amount of new builds that are currently under construction. I believe it's up to 10. And the details you can find a little bit more in that full quarterly report or in our wind analytics tool. If we turn our attention now to auction activity in Q1, of course, the UK's INTOG round awarded the largest volumes of the quarter. Cerulean Winds and Flotation Energy were the biggest winners in terms of capacity. They each won numerous sites. And traditional oil and gas players like TotalEnergies also saw some wins, but I think it's interesting that the awarded capacity was really highly concentrated, both in terms of geographical area and also in terms of who won. So the round, as we know, targeted 2 specific categories. The one category was the decarbonization of existing oil and gas assets, and one category was for innovation. But it leaves a lot of questions. We still don't really know how these pure play offshore wind actors will interact with the oil and gas companies that they're meant to be decarbonizing. On the innovation side, we expect that these projects, which are much smaller projects, they'll be fast-tracked and they will move ahead somewhat quickly. In terms of auctions, it's also notable that Poland made headlines this quarter. They're the first Baltic country to award capacity in the region. So PGE made tidy work of the competition here. They won a clean sweep of all 4 of the 5 sites that were awarded in Q1 in Poland. The results of the remaining 6 of the total 11 sites on offer in the 2022 round are expected to be announced in mid-2023. And I think it's notable here that we saw a very high number of bidders in Poland's recent auction, and this really shows that the market has an appetite for Baltic waters. But in Poland, at least, only a few bidders really managed to navigate the country's extremely complex regulatory process and actually qualify for a permit. So although we expect interest in the area will remain high, especially in Poland's next auction in May, it really remains to be seen if the country, how the country will deal with this. Will they clarify their process, or perhaps the industry will just get savvier in its approach? And finally, we have to mention turbines, of course. The quarter saw some really interesting developments in the turbine market, which, as we know, is an area that has really struggled in the last few quarters. Hard contracts were still really hard to come by. None of the 3 main turbine suppliers inked a new contract in Q1. But Siemens Gamesa and Vestas were successful in clinching a few preferred supplier agreements. So Siemens Gamesa was announced as a preferred supplier for 72 turbines. That's for RWE's Thor project in Denmark. Late in March, the company was also announced as the preferred supplier for Iberdrola's East Anglia 3 project in the UK. And Vestas was appointed as the preferred wind turbine supplier for the North Sea Cluster project in Germany. And that project is a JV between RWE and Northland Power. For that preferred supplier agreement, it did detail that Vestas will provide 104 turbines. That will be their V236 of their 15 megawatt turbine model. But nonetheless, these aren't kind of official contracts. And despite the challenges of getting official contracts, both GE and Siemens Gamesa made huge news by announcing new factories in New York State. So though both of those would be located at the Port of Coimans, which is a marine terminal on the Hudson River. Construction of the facilities will be contingent upon winning a sufficient volume of contracts as a part of New York State's third solicitation round, and the results from that round will be announced in the second quarter, Q2. And we think that the outcome of this solicitation round and the ramifications that it has on these manufacturing facilities will be a real game changer. It's really a savvy move by New York State. They're clearly aiming to position themselves as a manufacturing hub for the entire eastern US seaboard, which is an offshore wind market that's really taking off. And attracting a tier 1 facility now would not only foster the development of very necessary offshore wind infrastructure in the region, but really establish a hub of skilled workers in that region, which will be able to service the market for decades to come. So that is definitely one to watch, and one which we expect news from any day now. That's it for us as far as our monthly or our quarterly update, I should say. As I mentioned earlier, our full report does provide a lot more detail, covers contracts in much more detail, much more granularity. If you'd like to receive that report, we are providing it for free today for everyone in attendance. So please just shoot Ryan an email. His email is ryan.tolson@esgian.com, and we'll be happy to send you a copy. And as Ryan mentioned, all of the information that we shared today is also available in our wind analytics dashboard.
Excellent. Thanks, Suzanne, for a fantastic, quick and dirty update on the Q1 offshore wind market. We do have some time for some questions here, so feel free to type them into the Q&A section, and we'll be sure to get to them. While we do wait for if there are any questions, I have one myself. While you were on slide 2, you said that there were 10 new build vessels under construction. Can you clarify if that includes new build orders that were announced in Q1?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that doesn't include the new orders that were announced in the first quarter. So there were 3 additional new build orders, which I think really shows the tightness in the market. And that was one from Quaterly, one from CJEX, and one from Havfram.
Fantastic. I do see a question just came through. You mentioned that Poland would have an additional auction in May, but you also said the Baltics in general were receiving a lot of interest. Does that mean other Baltic countries are auctions scheduled?
You broke up there a little bit, but I think the question was, do other Baltic countries have auctions scheduled?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so Poland has one in Q2 that will happen in May. Lithuania and Estonia also have auctions on the books, but that will be later this year. And I believe both of those are expected in Q4. But they will announce more concrete timelines probably in Q2. So the Baltic region in general is going to see a lot of action this year.
Excellent, excellent. No, thank you very much. If you do have questions, feel free to send them through. But in the meantime, be sure to sign up for our newsletter. Follow us on LinkedIn for future events. We will be in Copenhagen next week for Wind Europe. So if anyone on this call will also be in Copenhagen, I would love to meet you in person. Feel free to shoot me an email. We can schedule a time to talk in person, say just do a quick introduction, or if you want to stop by our booth, we are part of Team Norway. So don't hesitate to say hi. And I want to thank everyone for their time. It looks like there's no additional questions here. But a reminder, every third Thursday of the month, we do host a short and quick update on relevant offshore wind news. So I will be following up with everyone in the coming weeks for our next one. I hope you found this beneficial, and thanks for everyone's time here. See you guys soon.